The Metal Gear Solid series is pretty unique in the fact that it's an action-adventure stealth series with crazy characters and an even crazier plot. The dialogue-heavy cutscenes and exchanges between characters sometimes make the games feel more akin to movies, but that's just part of the series' charm. Each new entry usually offers a similar yet unique experience in gameplay mechanics as well as fleshing out the story within the Metal Gear universe. With that being said, let's take a look at the beginning of the Metal Gear timeline with Metal Gear Solid 3. Unlike the previous entries in the Metal Gear series, Metal Gear Solid 3 is the origin story of how Big Boss became the Big Boss. The story starts with Snake being sent in to retrieve a Russian scientist by the name of Sokolov, who had defected to the United States, but was later returned to the Soviet Union following the events of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Snake is successful in retrieving Sokolov, but as they make their escape, Snake's former mentor, the Boss, confronts them, who has apparently defected to the Soviet Union. She is joined by Colonel Volgin, who plans on using Sokolov's invention, the Shagohod, to end the Cold War. The Boss proceeds to kick Snake's ass and Sokolov is taken away. As the Boss and Volgin leave, Volgin decides to blow up Sokolov's lab with one of the rockets the Boss brought, in order to make it seem that the Boss had destroyed the lab and implicate the United States. A week later, Snake returns. This time he is tasked with saving Sokolov, destroying the Shagohod, and killing Colonel Volgin and the Boss. During his mission, Snake meets up with Eva, who is a double agent and is responsible for providing Snake with information during his mission. As Snake makes his way through the jungle, he runs into members of the Boss's Cobra unit, who he disposes of until he reaches the facility where the Shagohod is being housed. Finally, Snake finds Sokolov, but as they plan to make their escape, Colonel Volgin captures Snake and tortures him. Eventually, Snake rendezvous with Eva, where they set up a plan to blow up the facility that houses the Shagohod, as well as the Shagohod itself. However, soon after all the C3 is placed, Snake is ambushed by Volgin, Ocelot, and the Boss, who have captured Eva. Eva's cover is blown when Volgin discovers that she has taken the Philosopher's Legacy, which is a cache of money from Russia, America, and China that was supposed to be used to fund secret projects that were used to win World War II, and were later supposed to be divided between the three countries. The Boss takes Eva away while Volgin and Snake fight, until Volgin is defeated. Outside of the base, Snake meets up with Eva, who has planned their escape, but just as they are about to leave, the Shagohod bursts from the hangar and chases after them. Eva then devises a plan to drive for the bridge where she had placed plastic explosives, hoping they could shoot them and blow up the Shagohod. The plan fails as the Shagohod makes it over the bridge, but Snake is able to destroy it and kill Volgin as well. Finally, Eva and Snake make it to the Wig, but not before Snake fights and kills the Boss in battle. After their escape, Snake and Eva make their way to Alaska and spend the night together. But when Snake wakes up, he finds that Eva is gone, but has left a recording for him to listen to. At this point, Eva reveals that she's not a double agent, but in fact a triple agent, as she really works for the Chinese, and that her mission was to find and acquire the Philosopher's Legacy for the Chinese. She also reveals that the Boss's real mission was to find and acquire the Philosopher's Legacy for the United States. That is why she defected to the Soviet Union. However, when Volgin blew up Sokolov's research facility with the Davy Crockett to frame the Boss willingly gave her life in order to cover up the mission the United States had sent her on. After the credits, there's another twist, as it is revealed that Ocelot was really the American contact Snake was supposed to meet up with, and that the chip containing the Philosopher's Legacy that Eva took was actually a fake, and that Ocelot had had the real one. Out of all the Metal Gear Solid games, I feel that Snake Eater's story is by far the best and most coherent. Sure, at the end of the game, the story sort of gets out of control when the game shits out 3 twists in a row, but it was easier to follow than the other big twists in the other games, like Metal Gear Solid 2's nonsensical ramblings about the Patriots. I also like the fact that this game told the story of Big Boss. I never played the original Metal Gear games, but from playing through Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, I had heard all about how Big Boss was a villain and wanted to take over the world or some shit like that. But it was kind of interesting to see him in the role of a hero. Not only that, but it was interesting to see that the motives behind his plans weren't because he was a bad guy, but because of the fact that he hoped to create a world that would honor the Boss's legacy. Now, even though I like the story of Metal Gear Solid 3, I can understand how some people might have a problem with it. First off, the cutscenes can be pretty long. The opening cinematic alone is about 30 minutes long, which can be pretty frustrating when all you want to do is to start playing a game and you have to sit through a long-winded opening cinematic. And it doesn't stop there though, as there are plenty of other long cutscenes in the game, making it feel more like a movie. Another issue that people might have is that at the end of the game, the story starts to explode with the typical craziness that is attributed with Metal Gear games, as you find out that everyone was double-crossing everyone else. This isn't new to Metal Gear Solid 3, but that's all the more reason as to why it's kind of annoying, since this shit has been done so many times before. Unlike the other Metal Gear Solid games, Snake Eater is mainly set in the jungle, which is vastly different from the close confining areas of Shadow Moses or the Big Shell. Because the jungle was so open, it made sneaking a lot harder since it was more difficult to see enemies. It also didn't help that the radar was a much more basic model than in previous Metal Gear games. Of course, considering that this game takes place before the other Metal Gear Solid games, I can understand the downgrade to the radar, but all the same, since the game didn't have an advanced radar system, it would have been nice if the setting weren't so open. The controls of the Metal Gear games have always been a little strange, but after having not played it a long time and going back to it, the controls in Snake Eater are really outdated. Movement in the game is simple enough when standing, however, seeing as how this is a stealth game, you'll spend most of your time crawling. To start crawling, you can tap the X button once to crouch and then again to crawl, or you can hold it to go straight to crawling. Now the main problem with this is that you can't walk while crouching, so I don't know why you'd want to crouch, especially since enemies can spot you just as easily when you're crouching as they can when you're standing. Next, crawling in general is awkward, as sometimes if I got too close to a wall while I was crawling, I would end up getting stuck and have to readjust myself to keep moving. There's also the fact that moving while crawling is so fucking slow, which is exacerbated by the fact that the environments in Metal Gear Solid 3 are a lot bigger than in other Metal Gear games. Next there's the combat. Metal Gear Solid 3 introduced close quarters combat, which allowed you to do different combat maneuvers with different button presses. Of course, in order to pull these moves off, you had to approach enemies at certain angles and hold down the button with the right amount of pressure. Basically, it made hand-to-hand combat more complicated than necessary. Gunplay also suffers from the controls. Like Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3 allowed for you to shoot in third and first person view. In order to shoot in third person, you would have to hold down the square button to lock onto the target and release to fire a shot. If you released too slowly, then you'd put your gun down without shooting. The problem with third person view was that it was difficult to tell if you were locked onto an enemy, and I thought that in general the auto lock just didn't work. Now in order to shoot in first person mode, you need to hold down the R1 button, then you need to hold down the square button to shoot. The same rules apply where if you let go of the square button too slowly, you'll just put your gun away. Now obviously first person mode makes it easy to see your target, but at the same time you're forced to stand still and are open to attacks. Not only that, but you have to press down the R1 and square button, and then release the square button just to shoot. I feel like it would have made more sense if your gun were automatically pulled up when you hit R1 when you had a weapon equipped, and that pressing square made you shoot, because there were several times when I had a shot lined up, but when I released the square button, I didn't shoot, which was pretty annoying. I've always kind of felt that the boss fights didn't really fit in the confines of the Metal Gear Solid games. For one, there's such a huge divergence from the core Metal Gear gameplay as the game is mainly based on stealth, whereas the boss fights are more action-oriented. Second, I feel as though the controls of the game don't really work in more action-oriented gameplay. In a lot of the boss battles, you need to be able to shoot the boss, and in order to do that, you have to stop moving, zoom in, and then pull out your weapon. Of course, while you're doing this, the boss has an opportunity to maneuver around you and maybe get a few shots off on you, or you can end up losing sight of the boss. There's also the fact that it's pretty disorienting to go from third person to first person view. Another problem I had with the bosses is that a lot of them were able to recover their stamina when they were close to being beaten, which was frustrating when trying to non-lethally take down a boss. The fight with the Endo is also probably one of the most frustrating in the entire series. So unlike other boss fights where you're restricted to one area, the battle at the end takes place over 3, as he can move freely between 3 different areas. Not only that, but there are also several different spots in each area where he can hide, and all you have to go on is that the sniping areas are marked on your map. But the end specific location isn't marked unless you get shot by him or you spot him yourself. Of course, then you have the task of getting to his location, and sometimes you'll have to go through other areas to get to where he is hiding. However, by the time you get where you think he is, he can end up moving locations. So after about half an hour fucking around and getting the end stamina down below half, he suddenly decided to recover all of it and basically undo all the effort I had done. Seeing as how I didn't want to fuck around with him anymore, I decided to change the clock and kill the end without having to do anything. Sure, it's cheap, but I really didn't want to sit through and have to search for him all over again. Metal Gear Solid 3 introduced a lot of new mechanics to the series, the first being the camo system. Basically, you're given different camo outfits that you can wear that will allow you to blend into the environment, and that will make sneaking easier. In theory it sounds like a cool idea, but in practice it's a huge pain in the ass to have to go into the menu and switch camo in every area, and sometimes multiple times in an area. Second, there's the stamina system. Stamina affects how quickly Snake recovers from injury. The higher his stamina, the faster he recovers. Stamina also dictates how fast Snake's oxygen would decrease when he's swimming, or how fast his grip decreases when he's hanging onto ledges. When Snake's stamina is less than 50%, his hands will start to shake when he's holding up weapons in first person. In order for Snake to recover stamina, he needs to eat food or animals that he kills in the jungle. The stamina meter in the game isn't too much of an issue, as you can find a lot of animals in each area. The third new mechanic is the medical treatment. Basically, when Snake takes injury from gunshots, gets poisoned, or gets stabbed, he'll need to be healed. Some wounds will go away over time, but others will continue to decrease Snake's stamina or life. The menu does a good job of telling you how to cure each ailment, so you don't have to worry about clicking on different surgical tools when trying to heal yourself and wasting them in the process. That being said, it can be annoying when you're in a shootout or in a boss fight and every time you get hit you have to go into the menu and kill yourself. Now, Snake Eater is probably one of the worst escort missions in any video game. So near the end of the game, a branch impales Eva and you're tasked with healing her wounds. The problem with this is that even after Eva's wounds have been healed, her stamina gauge will diminish at an accelerated rate, which means that you have to keep feeding her because if her stamina bar reaches one segment, she'll crouch on the ground and stop moving. Of course, since you're in the jungle, that makes it difficult to find her. Luckily, you can look at your map to find her position. Another problem I had was that I kept losing Eva. It seemed that if I didn't constantly beckon her to follow me, or if I got too far ahead, she would just stop. To top it all off, enemy guards are chasing you during this segment, and good luck getting away from them if they see you, because Eva will just completely stop, and wave after wave of guards will surround you. And you think that Eva will provide more support, seeing as how she has a gun, but in reality she shot like 3 guards while I tried to stop them from killing her. The sad thing about this part is that you only need to guide her through 2 areas, so it really shouldn't have been that big of an issue, but I ended up spending half an hour trying to get through this part. So now the big question, is this game overrated? Surprisingly, yes, I'd say it is. When I decided to replay Metal Gear Solid 3, I honestly thought it would be just as good as I remembered it to be. And while I do think that the story is still one of the best in the series, the gameplay is just really outdated. I know that some people might be able to look past the flaws that the gameplay has, because of the fact that the story is so good. But I can't, because at the end of the day, this is a video game. This isn't a movie where the story is one of the most important parts. It's true that a good story can make a good game great, but stories in video games aren't essential. Not only that, but this game is so story focused that it's pretty much half the game, which doesn't really work in a video game since video games are an interactive medium. Besides the fact that this gameplay doesn't hold up, there are several segments like the boss fight with the end and the escort mission with Eva that are just overall frustrating, and in the end really hurt this game.